Hello everyone and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. As midnight approached, the smell of pricey whiskey and unresolved pain permeated the executive room of Forrester Creations. Steffy Forrester stood close to the window, the far-off lights of Los Angeles shattering her reflection in the glass. The blur of empty little bottles and the incessant churn of thoughts she was unable to stop had been her flight from Monaco. More profound than any disagreement they had ever had was Finn's choice to conceal Sheila's presence on that aircraft. The pattern, the recurring decision to defend the woman who had once almost destroyed their family over the woman who had rebuilt her life around him, was more significant than just the lie. Carter Walton sat on the edge of the leather sofa across the room, a half-empty glass hanging from his fingers. Daphne's wedding band, a chilly metal reminder that the future they had envisioned had vanished the instant her diagnosis was confirmed, remained on the desk where she had left it hours ago. Convinced that she was unworthy of the life they had created since she couldn't conceive, she had boarded a plane for Paris without looking back. Carter had pled with her to stay and provided all the assurances, but nothing had been sufficient. Any disagreement was drowned out by the silence she left behind. They hadn't intended to get together. Steffy had come to the office because it was the only place that still felt like hers, a stronghold of ambition and fabric that kept the anarchy of Monaco at bay. Carter had stayed because leaving would have meant dealing with an empty house and the specter of a marriage that had ended before it had really started. At first, neither of them spoke when their gazes locked. Words were not necessary to acknowledge the common destruction. At last, Steffy broke the silence. She told him everything, including the altercation on the terrace with a view of the Mediterranean, the way Finn's expression hardened when she insisted he make a decision, and the finality in her own voice when she said the marriage was ended. Carter listened to her without interjecting, putting aside his own suffering for the moment. He got up and filled both glasses with another measure of whiskey after she was done. As he gave her one, the liquid caught the dim light. They spent hours conversing. Carter talked about the consultations, the experts, and the silent evenings when Daphne sobbed on his chest and he felt completely powerless. He recounted how, with the same meticulous attention to detail she employed when packing samples for a client, she had removed the ring off her finger and placed it down. Steffy nodded, realizing the unique anguish of witnessing a loved one decide that love is insufficient. Alcohol and sadness sometimes cause conversations to veer onto safer topics, such as work, designs, the never-ending cycle of fashion weeks, and fabric orders. The undercurrent persisted, though. The same question lingered between them each time their gazes locked. What happens when two cautious people suddenly have nothing left to lose? The cautious boundaries they had upheld for years had started to erode by the time the bottle was almost emptied. Steffy leaned forward to highlight a point about a new collection, her hand resting on Carter's arm, with a familiarity that felt both unfamiliar and inevitable. His fingers swept a lock of hair away from her face. Neither withdrew. The situation was much more explosive and far less personal in Monaco. With each syllable, Ridge Forrester's voice rose as he paced the hotel suite like an animal in a cage. Finn stood at the window, attempting to describe the series of circumstances that had resulted in Steffy's sudden departure. He maintained that Sheila's arrival had been an unwanted surprise, that he had spent the whole trip attempting to limit the damage, and that he had never planned for her to join the aircraft. Ridge would have none of it. "You picked her," Ridge remarked, his words cutting. "Once more. You picked the lady who shot my wife, who intimidated my children, and who has never once demonstrated a true moment of transformation." Brooke tried to mediate, her normally composed demeanor shaken by the gravity of the situation. "And now Steffy is gone, and you are here making excuses." Ridge was reminded by her that Finn had struggled for years to deal with the unfeasible circumstance of having Sheila as his biological mother. She noted that although Steffy's response was reasonable, it had been excessive. Ridge had no interest in subtleties. He saw the equation as straightforward. Finn had once again failed to shield Steffy from Sheila's influence. Ridge's rage was only heightened by Finn's attempts to defend himself. Ridge reacted instantly and categorically when Finn called Sheila his mother. Finn's mother was Lee Finnegan. Despite never having earned the title, Sheila posed a threat. The debate was so intense that it seemed to resonate through the suite's walls. The Mediterranean slammed on the coast somewhere in the distance, unaffected by the family drama taking place far above it. The hours in Los Angeles kept passing by. Moving from the couch to the desk and back again, Steffy and Carter's chat became increasingly intimate and silent. As their marriages fell apart, they talked about the children, Hayes and Kelly waiting at home, the future they both still desired. They discussed the peculiar symmetry of their circumstances, how they had both thought they had at last reached stability only to see it break under uncontrollable pressures. The conversation slowed down at one point. Their distance from one another shrank. Steffy's decision to rest her head on Carter's shoulder felt more like a natural way to end the evening than a deliberate one. Warm and steady, he wrapped his arm around her. The ensuing kiss was neither urgent nor frantic. It was a slow, deliberate kiss that recognizes the seriousness of what could happen. They were both aware of the dangers. Even though Steffy had ended the marriage in a fit of rage, she was still legally wedded. The paperwork for Carter and Daphne's divorce was still pending. A scandal of this size would affect every department, every design meeting, and every boardroom discussion since the Forrester empire depended heavily on public perception. However, those worries seemed far away and abstract in comparison to the urgent need for connection at that very time. The inexorable logic of folks who have been holding themselves together for too long was evident as the night went on. Clothes were thrown away ceremoniously. Their bodies moved with a mixture of urgency and unexpected tenderness as they found comfort in one another, the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. For a few hours, the mere presence of another person took the place of the agony of the preceding days. There would be repercussions in the morning. Eventually, Finn would learn that Steffy had sought solace elsewhere rather than just leaving Monaco. Already halfway around the globe, Daphne might discover that the man she had left behind had not stayed by himself. If Ridge discovered the entire scope of what had transpired in the executive suite, his already volcanic rage would find a new target. At Forrester Creations, the delicate balance of power would change in unexpected ways. However, none of those realities had fully materialized as the first dim light of dawn peeked through the windows. Steffy listened to Carter's steady breathing as she laid across his chest. Neither of them was quite prepared to discuss what would happen next as Carter's fingertips moved idly along her back. On the desk, the bottle of alcohol was empty. Outside, the city carried on its uncaring march toward another day. The consequences of their decisions would become increasingly apparent in the hours that followed. Steffy would have to determine if the solace she had discovered was a short-term diversion or the start of a more difficult situation. Carter would have to face the fact that finding comfort in Steffy's arms had not made the agony of Daphne's leaving go away. Rather, it had just made matters worse. Unaware of how drastically the earth had changed beneath him, Finn, still in Monaco, would board an aircraft with a rising sense of dread. The Forrester family's relationships had always been complex, a web of rivals and allegiances that changed with each new alliance and treachery. The hazard associated with this particular entanglement was different. It had nothing to do with the long-simmering animosities between rival design companies or the cunning maneuvering of boardroom politics. It was the more subdued, intimate danger of two individuals who had previously acted within cautious bounds abruptly deciding to disregard them. Steffy had devoted years to creating a life characterized by power and dominance. After years of instability and grief, her marriage to Finn had been a difficult triumph. She was more exposed than she was willing to acknowledge after witnessing it fall apart due to Sheila's unrelenting presence. Carter had always been the dependable figure at Forrester, the attorney who skillfully handled the company's legal challenges. A chance for the kind of everyday happiness that had long eluded him had come with his marriage to Daphne. His cautious poise had been torn away by losing it so suddenly. More than fate, timing played a role in their meeting. The night in the executive suite would not have occurred if Daphne's diagnosis had occurred at a different time, or if Finn had been able to keep Sheila farther away. Rather, the world had placed them in the same room with the same empty bottle and the same frantic need to feel something other than loss, precisely aligning their heartbreaks. The effects started to emerge in the silent areas between them as the sun rose higher above Los Angeles. Eventually, Steffy would have to confront Finn about the extent of her disappointment and the decisions she had made in the wake of it. Should Daphne ever change her mind, Carter would have to face the fact that the solace he had sought may make any further attempts at reconciliation more difficult. Their long-standing business partnership would never be the same. Ridge's rage in Monaco was just the start of the family strife. His protective instincts would go into overdrive as soon as he learned the whole tale of Steffy's night with Carter. Once more, Brooke would have to try to balance conflicting allegiances. As the grown-ups around them dealt with yet another level of emotional complexity, the younger members of the family, Electra, RJ, and the others, would observe from the sidelines. Despite the drama that was about to unfold, the hours spent in the executive suite had provided Steffy and Carter with something they hadn't felt in weeks, a brief respite from the unrelenting pain of disappointment. They stayed entangled together in the peaceful aftermath, unable to give up the brittle tranquility they had discovered as the city began to awaken around them and the weight of the upcoming day drew near. The tale of Steffy and Carter's evening would go on to become another chapter in the lengthy and intricate history of Forrester Creations, serving as a reminder that even the most meticulously planned lives can fall apart when faced with heartbreak and the unanticipated solace of an old friend. It was unclear if that chapter would result in more entanglement or a quick and agonizing reckoning. The knowledge that the world outside the office walls would ultimately demand an accounting, and the shared quiet of two people who had crossed a line they could not simply uncross were the only things that were certain for the time being. The last moments of Friday's episode likely had you screaming at the television if you're like the majority of devoted watchers of The Bold and the Beautiful. Reeling from yet another betrayal involving her husband Finn and his notorious biological mother Sheila Carter, Steffy Forrester Finnegan took a flight back to Los Angeles from Monaco and drank her way across the Atlantic. Carter Walton was doing the same thing back at Forrester Creations. When Daphne Rose removed her wedding ring, declared she was going back to Paris, and left his life, his new marriage to her had just collapsed spectacularly. Two damaged individuals. Two bottles are empty. One peaceful office after work. The math wasn't difficult. The scene was set for the kind of nasty, drunken collision that daytime has honed over decades by the time Steffy staggered into the executive room and discovered Carter already drowning his sorrows. Only the nebulous promise that Steffy and Carter will seek comfort from one another is offered in the official Monday teasers for August 17th. Anyone who has been watching this show for more than a season is aware of the typical meaning of that term. When two attractive, emotionally distraught persons share a bottle and a dimly lit room, tea and sympathy are rarely on the menu. The gradual removal of clothing and whiskey are much more likely. It's a traditional, bold, and beautiful configuration. For years, Steffy has battled to keep Sheila out of her family's life. The woman has shot her. She has seen her come dangerously close to ruining Finn several times. She has set firm boundaries and upheld them with the furious protectiveness that characterizes her. However, Finn always finds an excuse to leave the door slightly open when she thinks the threat has finally been eliminated. The couple's most recent trip to Monaco was intended to be a romantic reset, an opportunity to rekindle their relationship away from the tumult in Los Angeles. Rather, whatever tenuous calm they had managed to restore was destroyed by Sheila's presence on the same trip, and Finn's unwillingness to fully exclude her. Steffy didn't simply walk away. Before the wheels even lifted off the ground, she flung her ring, got on an aircraft, and began drinking. Carter's grief is more subdued but no less severe. He appeared to have found stability with Daphne after years of romantic near-misses and public humiliations. They tied the knot. They discussed beginning a family. The dream of biological children vanished when the medical news came. Carter was shocked by Daphne's choice to go rather than deal with an uncertain future together. Suddenly, the man who had always been the dependable, steady presence at Forrester Creations was left with nothing except the empty CEO office and a drink. The recognition came instantly when Steffy showed up in the same doorway, equally devastated. They didn't have much to explain. They both knew exactly what it was like to see someone they loved make a different decision. It's highly likely that Monday's program will continue exactly where Friday left off. The two of them will remain in that office, the misery unabated and the drinks still flowing. When the lights are down and the barriers are down, conversations that begin as mutual venting have a tendency to become intimate. Strength and loyalty have always appealed to Steffy. Despite their claims to the contrary, Carter has always been drawn to women who require protection. These instincts will be heightened in their current conditions. An arm over a waist develops from a hand on a shoulder. A shared glance that lasts a few seconds too long replaces the shared silence. One of them will bend closer. The other won't retreat. The main concern is still whether they will indeed cross the finish line on Monday. Similar situations have previously been hinted at by the show, which occasionally withdrew at the last minute. However, the confluence of elements feels especially unstable this time. They both think their marriages are over. Both are so drunk that their judgment is clouded. When their emotions are broken, both have a habit of acting rashly. Additionally, the authors have dedicated years to making Carter the only employee at Forrester who can communicate with Steffy without the typical family baggage. Mutual destruction and that trust are a terrible combination. The Monaco plot will offer the ideal counterpoint of righteous rage as Steffy and Carter circle each other in Los Angeles. Ridge won't be in the mood to listen, and Finn will continue to try to explain himself to him. Sheila and the Forresters have a bloody and lengthy past. Ridge has witnessed Taylor, his ex-wife, come dangerously close to death because to Sheila. For years, he has witnessed his daughter's constant fear of the woman. He will find it unacceptable that Finn keeps making room for her in whatever way. Be prepared for yelling. Anticipate charges. Ridge will undoubtedly clarify that Finn's first allegiance should have been to Steffy and their kids, not to a manipulative woman with a body count. The only thing that might spread more quickly than Finn's final flight home is the level of Ridge's disapproval. What happens after the hangover is the bigger question that looms over the entire week. The repercussions of Steffy and Carter sleeping together will be felt for months. Finn's last-ditch efforts to get his wife back will soon encounter a far more formidable challenge. If Daphne finds out that her spouse swiftly found solace elsewhere, her decision to leave would seem less definitive. At Forrester Creations, the balance of power will also change. Carter has always held a special place, trusted by almost everyone and not affiliated with any one group. Ridge, Brooke, Hope, and others would view him differently if he crossed that line with Steffy. Additionally, it would alter Steffy's self-perception. She has been portraying herself as the moral compass of her generation of Forresters for years. A night spent intoxicated with her coworker would make that picture much more difficult. The issue of timing is another. When Finn discovers Steffy has abandoned him, he is not the kind to remain motionless. Later in the week, spoilers indicate that he will rush back to Los Angeles with the intention of making amends. It's soap opera gold that he might show up while Steffy and Carter are still recovering from their night together. Envision the conflict. Imagine how it will appear. Imagine how Steffy would have to make a decision in real time about whether the comfort she experienced was worth the potential long-term harm. The program may still go the gentler route, of course. After sharing their suffering without taking any action, Steffy and Carter might find up dozing out on different ends of the couch at the end of Monday. That version would raise the emotional stakes while maintaining the potential for friendship. However, it seems more likely that the writers want to push the envelope considering the way Friday's episode was filmed. The lingering looks, the close contact, the shared vulnerability. When the drama calls for it, Bold and Beautiful has never been afraid to put its characters in difficult situations. The classic definition of that requirement is two attractive, lonely, inebriated individuals in a deserted office after dark. This specific pairing is intriguing because of how little love history they actually have in common. In contrast to Hope's never-ending triangle with Liam and Thomas or Steffy's convoluted past with Liam, Steffy and Carter have primarily been in a familial and professional circle. Any physical connection could feel more threatening and fresh since there is no past baggage. Neither a reunion nor a relapse would occur. it would be something completely different, formed out of pain at the same time. Because neither party anticipated them, those stories can occasionally be the most intense. Carter has a notoriously bad romantic history. He has frequently been cast as the safe backup option, manipulated, and abandoned at the altar. A date with Steffy would signify something different, an equal match between two powerful individuals who are aware of the internal pressures at Forrester Creations. It remains to be seen if that link would endure. Steffy is a mother. Despite all of his shortcomings, she is still loved by her spouse. If her father finds out that she sought comfort from the company's legal counsel, he will go insane. There are significant practical challenges. Perhaps even bigger are the emotional ones.